Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to episode 2 of Woody Reads Lazarus, a project that I've committed myself to rereading every issue of Image Comics' Lazarus by Michael Lark and Greg Rucka. A little bit about me, why am I doing this, why in God's name would I do this? My name is Woody, I'm an actor, and I like Lazarus because I think it's the most cinematic comic ever made, and for that reason I want to, in these videos, go through kind of like from an actor's perspective and looking at the panels as if it was a camera lens and what kind of story is being told and how the story is being told with that in mind. Ever since I posted the first video, someone on Reddit commented, "This is straight up theft." So the reviews are in. I'm a thief. Today we're going to do issues, I think I'm going to go through 2 through 4. I don't want to dwell too much on them individually because I kind of want to get to that later on in the series where I think it picks up steam and really gets into its groove. So I'm going to be reading from Volume 1 of the trade. Let's jump right in to issue number 2. Here we go. This is Family Chapter 2. This is the cover, I believe, and Michael Lark has said that he draws the covers before he even knows what happens in the issue. Many times before he even reads the script. He doesn't want to know what's going to happen in the comic before he reads the script. So he's finding out in real time, which is really cool. He finds out in the same rate at which we, the reader, finds out. And he says he wants to do this because he doesn't want knowing what's going to happen affect how he draws the panels. Which I think is very cool and speaks to his instincts as an artist to not tip his hat or pooch like plot twists that happen later on down the line. And this image is, for that reason, I think some of the covers can feel a little generic. So in this panel here of Forever walking forward with a gun, the sword drawn, this moment doesn't actually happen in this issue, and it's kind of more vibe, tone. It's just her being a badass with the kind of Mexican, with this kind of Breaking Bad color filter thrown over it. So here we go, issue number 2. I'm gonna be jumping around a little bit on this one. So number 1, I love this panel. We see it again later on. This panel gets used a lot. I noticed this because in the foreground we always have, I love recognizing this little skiff, these like G.I. Joe Dreadnought skiff guys. This is like the Zartan and Blowtorch. We're like, anyway, anytime I see this little skiff, I'm like, oh, I've seen this panel before. And I think that it's also, I've seen some of Lark's original art for this series, and the production schedule, I think, is essentially hinges on him because he does all the art, and the art is exhaustive. And I really want to give a shout out to Lark because he is at least 50% of this project, in the sense that the art makes this series, along with the writing, obviously. But he said in an interview that he uses SketchUp, a Google program, to, like, this is in the past, I don't know if he still does this, to 3D map the interiors of these spaces so that he can have a reference and make them as precise as possible, which, I mean, the dedication at that level is very, very impressive. So the art on, so it makes sense to me that he would kind of recycle. So in the sense that there's some panels where you have two people, like this, for example, a version of this I've seen where, in the original art, where it's basically the same drawing, right? So he'll draw this, and then in the original art, he won't draw this entire panel. He'll just draw the head coming up, with the understanding that the rest will be composited over the same exact, it's the same moment. And this happens every once in a while, and I think it's very smart, and also makes these moments of stillness really pop. So here we go. We're in Puget Sound, Carlisle. We see Forever coming out of a shower, and here's Bethany. This is our introduction to Bethany. We know she's smart because she's got glasses, y'all. And she takes after her mom, Abigail, who we haven't met yet. And nice little intro to their relationship, and also reminder that of what Forever is. So it's kind of, we're lensing Forever through Bethany's POV, which is through this iPad, and she's evaluating, she's maintaining her, right? her and James, essentially their relationship to Forever is they're constantly maintaining her and making sure she's running correctly, as if she were a machine. And so these images speak to that idea, is like she's being diagnostically evaluated, and in the same way that Forever calls out, it makes me feel like a machine. Similarly, what I was saying before with the interiors in SketchUp, the way Lark draws the interiors. I love how the interiors are so, they're kind of like generic and anonymous and bloodless. The environments that the Carlisle family lives in, they're essentially just like a nice crate and barrel apartment with almost no personality in them. Usually, they almost feel like Airbnbs or anonymous hotel rooms or something. So here she is being evaluated. Very funny here. We get a little Bethany rump shot here. So we know she's got a nice butt, which also, I mean, serves the story as well, right? Because all the Carlisles they have the longevity formula, and so they maintain their hotness throughout all time. We see that later with Joanna when she comes out of the pool. She gets maintained here. Just some nice framing here. Forever looking down and being dominated by these pills. Her regimen, the thing that keeps her under the control of her family. So moving on, this is our introduction to the family here. We meet Stephen, the Jonah, and Bethany, who we saw before. So the thing about Stephen, I feel like he's the most underdeveloped character in the family, which is a shame because he's, I believe, the only queer character in the series, at least the only major queer character. And he's essentially, as Rucka has pointed out in an interview, he's basically Fredo of the family. Like, he's not meant to lead, and he doesn't want to lead, right? That's not what drives him. But everyone else, it is what drives Joanna, and it is what drives Malcolm. And that's kind of it, because Jonah's not a leader either, and Bethany's not a leader either. I guess the two people who contend for the head chair, if Malcolm's not in the picture, are Stephen and Joanna, which plays out later on. This is the Carlisle family crest. I looked it up. It's Latin. I believe it translates roughly as like, you don't have to like us, you just have to fear us. And the logo is like a DNA strand with a sword going through it. This is a nice little moment with Malcolm. So Malcolm has kind of this Shakespearean king-y quality to him. He does a lot of looking out of windows when he's being contemplative. It's a kind of behavioral thing that he does. I think he does like 4 or 5 times in the series. And in the same way that James Mann will be like, whenever he's thinking, he'll cover his mouth with his hand. It's these just little behavioral specifics that I really love about this series. It makes these characters more fully defined in my mind. I also think that if James Mann were ever to be cast, when this goes into production, I think they should cast whatever actor they got to play Cyclops in X-Men, the original Bryan Singer Cyclops. I think that guy should be James Mann. That's who I picture. So I love these little moments here because Malcolm knows that he's going to later on use Jonah as an inciting incident to go to war in Conclave. He already knows he's going to kill Jonah, I think, in this moment. And which means this whole moment where he's like, Jonah, you foolish boy, and then looking down and then feeling like overwhelmed by guilt or something. I feel like this is all a show for the benefit of Forever, so that she buys into the idea of what he's feeling. When in fact, I think he already knows he's going to do this, and on some level, sure, he can feel bad because he's deciding he's going to kill Jonah at some point. But I think this is mostly for her benefit, for this to land on her in this moment. We see the family interacting. Again, they hate Jonah. I love this little bitchy side smile that Stephen gives to himself when Bethany is berating Jonah. She grabs a knife. She's going to flay him. This action, honestly, I feel is a little forced in this issue because not a lot happens in this issue. And so Bethany slamming him down the ground and pulling out a knife and threatening to flay him feel out of character for her and also not It just doesn't feel organic to the family. Although I guess we don't really see Bethany and Jonah interact directly outside of this moment in the entire series, I don't think. At least not yet, by volume 7. So who knows? But I always felt like this sequence is a little forced because it's just to like spice up some action, because there's not really a lot like flashy, violent-wise that happens this. And here's Jonah screaming at the maid, kind of to set up this beat that happens in a second, but also to establish that Jonah's a shithead, and also to reinforce the idea that all serfs are seen as less than by the family, especially by Jonah. They go to L.A. This is our first view of L.A. It's a shithole, and by extension, we can imagine most of America's a shithole. This panel here I love. It's Forever and Jonah in a car, but it's very simple, just visual storytelling. They're both wearing sunglasses, can't see their eyes, can't trust each other, and they're looking out the window, not at each other. And so it just speaks to their isolation. And a lot of this arc of Forever's relies on her isolation from everyone. She's essentially in a silo of like information and of like emotional support, and she's very, her amount of exposure to things is very limited. And anyway, so to that sense, to speak to that, there's a lot of isolation that happens to her throughout the series, especially later on when we see young Forever. This is our introduction to Joanna. We see their kind of Jaime Lannister, Cersei Lannister relationship here. And this is a storyline that, like, their whole like twincest thing doesn't really get developed that much. It's hinted at verbally, and then this is about as close as we get to it, and which I'm fine with. I don't think we need to see them having sex or whatever. It's not what I'm signing up for, but it also, I think, at this point feels a little well-trod because Game of Thrones was happening somewhat simultaneously, and they hit that story a little more overtly, and it's like always like not to the benefit of anyone. No one's always, there's no audience member like, yeah, now for this twin incest to happen. And for that reason, I think this book steers clear of it, and I think pretty wisely. Mason, I love Mason. Can we just talk about how much I love Mason? Bald Mason. Mason has like 5 jobs in the series, 5 tasks that he has to do, and he does all of them shittily except for one. And I just love Mason. He's such a shithead. This sequence where he's following Forever, and then she gives this note to these kids and walks off, and then he comes up and takes the note, loses her, and then finds the note that says, "Mason, if you keep following me, I'm going to kill you." And his face, oh shit! I love this face. I bought this page as original art just because I think this it's just a lovely self-contained sequence that shows us how stupid Mason is, essentially. It's also worth noting, I think, that anytime a character calls Forever a bitch, which happens, I think, fairly, it happens enough that I noticed it. Anytime that happens, they always get punished. Either like they get killed, or they get beaten up, or their arm gets sliced off, or in this case with Mason, he gets humiliated. It's just a recurring thing that I find satisfying in this series, because again, it's like it doesn't. The bitch is not used gratuitously. It's used to make us not like this person that Forever will eventually triumph over. Here we go. Just like the choreography of this sequence is, she's biking, she pulls over and looks back, meaning Moray was standing there on the side of the road waiting for her. We see this great little tease panel here. He's got his sword. He's got a sword. The only people who have swords are, guess what? They're fucking Lazarus. And here we meet our first ever other Lazarus, Joaquin Moray, and his platoon of frag vipers over here. Great. So there's a little standoff here. The only reason this moment has tension is because Joaquin is there. If he's not there, no one is like worried that she's going to get jumped by these guys. Although just like the paneling, I mean, this is just very, very simple and effective visually storytelling by Lark. It's just, she's in the background, she's circled by these guys. She's completely surrounded. There's like at least a dozen guys on her, and then Joaquin is like coming up. This kind of like Johnny Deppy kind of guy in his presumably Matrix style leather black trench coat. That's issue 2. I'm just going to skip ahead to issue 3. This is the panel for issue 3. As we find out, this is, guess what? It's going to be we're going to find out on page 2, actually, but it's the surprise, of course, is that this hand has been severed, and that's her putting the sword back moments after having cut it off. So this is our introduction to Mexico. We see that the Moires are kind of equally. It's funny because when we see L.A. in issue 2, we see how much it's basically as much in disrepair as Mexico is, and it gives us a sense of like the disrepair of the general world. I believe this says like More tells us lies while we're starving in Spanish. And so this is this captain or whatever telling Forever to give over her weapons. And she goes, try it. And this is just, this is a great... The series is filled with these moments of the myth making. This imperious defiance on her part, and even though she's like visually outnumbered, it's like the get away from her, you bitch, from Aliens moment where she's challenging you, right? She knows there's no way you can defeat her, but it's just the moment before it happens. Go here. So this is great. So they're about to restrain her, and then Joaquin says, don't do it. I'm going to hand her over to my dad, and we're going to talk. We're going to have a powwow. And then he says, no, I'm going to search her. That's my job. And he's arguing with me. Yes, he is. This panel, I love this panel. It's anytime we get two Lazari sharing a beat, they're basically like two people that have fought a very specific war, and they're trauma bonded in some kind of way. And so they rarely have a chance to talk to each other. And when they do, I love how they talk to each other, because they're always like talking down about other people in general, because they know they are superior physically and militarily. But it's just a nice bonding moment between the two of them. And then he goes, by all means, search her. And then so she hands over his gun, and then he asks for her sword. She says no. He pulls a gun on her. And this very simple little exchange, he pulls the gun on her, and she looks to her left, clocking with Joaquin being like, I'm about to slice a bitch's hand off. Is that going to be a problem? And this very subtle, like, arched eyebrow in response. He's like, Lazarus got a Lazarus. Do what you got to do. And then she looks back knowing what she's about to do. It's just a lovely little, like, quiet sequence here. And they do this a lot. Rucka does this a lot, where he'll use the dialogue to show how quickly something happens. So he's like, your blade. And before he's done saying that, his hand has been severed. And she's already saying no. And he goes, so she's like, your blade. Oh, my hand's gone. And he's on the floor, blood flying out of his hand. This is very like samurai style. And while he's processing, this is a bad day for this guy. While he's processing that his hand is no longer on his body, Joaquin is already delivering the speech that ends with him being beheaded. It's just like, this guy is like, within the span of like 4 seconds, he's dead. And I don't even think he's aware of like the rate at which it happens. And just very funny, his body lying on the ground here. It's very, it reminds me of when Cheese is killed in The Wire, and then you just see his like twitching leg while the gangsters, what are they called? The co-op all kind of like disperse, and he's just like left there. It's just, it is very undignified, and it's a commentary on what happens when you F with the Lazari. This is a lovely moment between Joaquin and Forever. I mean, they're crushing, right? And this is about how, I like this because it's, at the end of the day, Forever is John Wick, but she's emotionally like a teenager. And that plays out in terms of how when she's frustrated, when she's insulted by her family, or in this case, when she's got a crush, and, like he compliments her, and then she looks away like this. She's embarrassed. This happens again over here, where she looks down. She looks down here and then like puts her hand by her head. It's just these great little moments, very human. And so this is also interesting, like Joaquin cutting her like a guava, I think this is, and just to be nice because he can't eat it. And this is kind of enzymes interfere with my implants, suggesting that he's biomechanical, which also lets us know that all the Lazari are different in this world. I mean, he's the only other Lazarus we've seen so far, but we know that Forever is genetically made and maintained, and his whole thing is he's basically a Terminator, a cyborg. This sequence does two things. One, I think it establishes and confirms that she's the brains of this duo. He basically does whatever she wants. And two, it shows us how calculating she is, because Charles, this guy who's named, so we remember him, is introduced, but overhears what they're talking about and, might not do anything about it, but it doesn't matter because she decides that he's going to get killed just for casually being there to hand her her robe and overhearing this. And so it kind of illustrates, it's kind of like a Bond villain thing of kill your henchman. But again, these are all tropes, but they all fly in this series. There's a lot of tropes that get kind of exploited by this series, but they're all, because the characters are well defined, stuff like this doesn't bother me, where she's like, we must now kill our henchman to show how bad a person I am. I buy it because it's consistent with her, as we'll see later on. Okay, so this is the the meeting, the parlay between Forever and Jacques and Edgar Moray, which is happening real quiet, because I don't think he's part of their coalition yet. I really love how the kind of dated and formal and stilted language that Lazarus speak in when they're delivering a message. It's almost like a telegram. And she is quoting verbatim this speech from Malcolm. She's reciting it, right? And so she sets it up. She says that before the end of the year, the Moray family will have a riot on their hands, an uprising from their people because they don't have food. And she pauses here, which, as we learn later on, is a built-in pause that her dad probably told her to say there. We see this, the flip side of this. We see Malcolm reciting to her her speech when she meets Sonia Bittner later on. So she basically pitches, we'll be allies and give you seed and grain and food in return for some helicopters, and also you have to cut your ties to Jonah, who we know betrayed us. He checks in with Consigliere. And eventually they haggle about the strains of the seeds. And I love this moment here. Right up until the agreement, they're like, okay, we're all good. Up until this if this panel didn't happen, she's still poised 50% to kill Jacqueline. She's constantly, she's a 50% anxiety level of maybe you have to murder Jacqueline and Edgar and this other guy right here, right now. But because he smiles, it's all good. It's just the tension of this world. She's flying back, going back to good old USA. They pause by the side of the road to have some water. Jacqueline is going to try to do his thing here. I love this vehicle. This is a very G.I. Joe kind of vehicle too. It's like a beach buggy or something, but it's got a machine gun on top. I don't know. It's these things don't feel cartoonish in the sense that this does feel like a vehicle from maybe 50 years in the future, military vehicle. Here's James and Bethany doing. They do this a lot too. They have this flirty relationship where she's like, maybe you're gonna have sex with me, James, man. What do you think about that? And he's like, maybe I will. And she's like, maybe you better. And that is always interrupted by the alarm. And so we see from their point of view, they're evaluating all her vitals and how they're crashing because a bomb just went off. Love this guy, this guy right here. I audition to be this guy all the time. A tech nerd, command center guy, communications man, the man in front of the keyboard. And Joanna here is already moving on to the next part of her plan, which suggests that she knew that this play on attacking Forever was never going to work, because she's already she doesn't know that the missile went off, and Forever's hurt or whatever. She's just immediately telling Mason to hit her because she's already on the next level of her plan, which is I need to make it look like I was abused by Jonah because he's a scapegoat now, which is some cold shit and kind of sets us up. It introduces Joanna as this manipulative sociopath, which she is, but also we see her genuinely, I think, later on having a relationship with Forever that is kind of trust-based. I mean, it's hard to say, like this all happens later on, but like I've always wondered how authentic Joanna's relationship with Forever becomes later on. If she's just truly like relying on her because they need each other, or because it's still an act of control, which Forever calls out. So we have dual action, Mason punching her, and also, once again, keep her still. Oh, sorry, just sliced my man's head open like a watermelon. And she was playing possum. She starts gutting these guys. Oh man, this action sequence is so intense. And he's a cyborg. He's got battle damage Terminator face. And God, this panel is so good. This is not one but two Lazarus fucking killing all these dudes, and it's just like these moments are so great. These are the myth making moments. They're just wiping these dudes out. Full fight or flight response. What the hell's going on down there? This guy, this fucking schmuck with a pistol. You think I'd take out Forever Carlisle with a pistol, my man? No, he drops it, presumably pisses his pants, and goes, I was following orders, and God, the sword goes through his throat. He's dead. He's deader than dead. I have good signal. Oh, shit, they're alive. I love this. Do you want to make another pass, sir? Mr. Carlisle? Should I make another pass, sir? He's like, fuck. He goes to tell Joanna, but she's already one step ahead of him. He goes, let me through. Mason goes, no. And he goes, what did you just, what? I don't understand it. Jonah's such a bitch. He never understands when people say no to him. Mason tells him, you better get out of here, and we'll buy you enough time to make your escape. Oh, God, I love this. She goes up to the helicopter, and she goes, you leave without me, I will carve you open. He goes, yes, ma'am. Just really all you can say in that moment. Yes, ma'am. This great little moment here. He's looking away because he's hiding his robo face. He's embarrassed. But to play it off, he says pity about the rover as if he's looking at his vehicle. She offers him a kindness. You can take my bike. He looks back. Thank you. And they have this moment. And they have this like weirdly formal go well Forever Carlisle. It's like Good Hunting from Battlestar. She comes back in. The same chopper, the same helicopter pilot isn't there. Being like, oop, good thing I'm still alive. And she sees the colors also. The colors in this series are so good. The color palettes. Like, this whole sequence is so moody and dark. And she's here. And it's just to sell this moment of like, do you forever believe that I was abused by Jonah? And she does. We see in her face that she does in the last panel, like, because she's a champion for hurt women, because she herself is a hurt woman. It works. The play works. And she comes home to her anonymous and, personality-less kind of IKEA cube that she lives in, her pod that she lives in. And she gets an email saying, he is not your father, this is not your family. And this, I think, is the actual inciting incident. I almost feel like this first full trade is a long first act to the series, because it sets up the world and it sets up the main characters that we're going to meet. Well, we still haven't met Casey and Michael, but it's about creating the core family relationships and introduces the main thing in her mind, which is he is not your father, this is not your family. And also, like, it requires all this to happen. Like, if she wasn't betrayed by Jonah, this email would not give her pause. If she got this email before being betrayed by Jonah, I don't think she would be responding to it this way. Like, this expression on her face is like, oh, this is landing on me, this means something, and becomes the splinter in her mind, to quote Inception, that drives the issues moving forward. I really like issues 2 through 4. I still think I personally feel Volume 1 is the slowest and clunkiest of the series. And I say this as somebody who loves the series, who appreciates that Greg Rucka is 4 times smarter than me, and that Michael Lark is a brilliant artist. And that the two of them together, they're way more than the sum of their parts. They are really they really create this amazing world. That is, what's truly impressive to me is I read this interview with Greg Rucka where he's like, this is from 9 years ago, and he's like, oh man, wait till you meet Forever's mom, Abigail. And the interviewer's like, oh, we're going to meet her mom? And he's like, yeah, don't worry. When that happens, that's going to be a big moment in the series. And that only just happened in Volume 7. It's like, this motherfucker knew 9 years ago that story point was going to be like a huge shift in the series. And it is. That all happens in Volume 7. So here we go. That's issues 2 through 4 of Lazarus. Thanks for watching, y'all. Thanks for joining me on this incredibly niche journey that I hope more than 32 people watch. Thank you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.